Thank you for listening to Heart Chat Stories. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave a comment and share these stories with someone who might need them. Each story is meant to help you pause, reflect, and think about your own relationships, how you love, how you heal, and how you grow. If you'd like more insight into the stories or want to add one to your next book club, visit graceguidance.com. You can find the full collection there, along with reflection prompts to keep the conversations going. And remember, every story in Heart Chat Stories is a chance to rediscover yourself, one honest chat at a time.
Sani sat alone, perched on a sleek bar stool at the edge of the bustling party. The room was softly lit, with laughter and music floating through the air, but she felt a bit adrift despite the inviting atmosphere. She hadn't come in search of romance or to collect business cards. She simply wanted a change from her usual lonely Friday nights. When her work friends mentioned the Mixer, an event equally split between networking and casual matchmaking, she decided to tag along, hoping for something different. The evening began with promise. Sani arrived with Francisco, Marky, Taylor, and Gael, their small group staking out one of the high-top tables near the center of the room. They ordered their first round of drinks, sparkling water for Sani, cocktails for the rest, and spent the next hour telling stories, exchanging jokes, and breaking into spontaneous shoulder dances whenever a favorite song played. The warmth of friendship made the night feel full of possibility, and for a while, she forgot her worries. But as the party filled up, the purpose of the event became clear. Familiar faces from other agencies weaved through the crowd, and clients appeared in clusters near the bar. One by one, her friends peeled away, Francisco greeting someone from a recent project, Marky swept into a conversation with a client, and Taylor and Gael splitting off to mingle with new acquaintances. The high top that once felt like a safe haven slowly emptied until Sani found herself sitting alone, watching others connect. She glanced around, searching for a familiar face, but everyone seemed engaged in animated conversations or laughter-filled exchanges. The initial awkwardness settled like a gentle fog. Sani wasn't sure whether to seek out her friends, introduce herself to someone new, or simply stay put and savor her solitude. Part of her longed to be part of the energy swirling around her, but another part was content to observe, quietly enjoying the buzz of social possibility. Sani took a slow sip of her drink and smiled to herself. Perhaps tonight wasn't about finding someone, or adding a new contact to her professional network. Maybe it was enough just to show up, to be present, and to know that she could choose where, and with whom, she wanted to spend her time. For now, she let the music wash over her. "Hey, I'm going to sit next to you, and I want you to act like you don't know me, so no one thinks we're together," a man said as he slid into the seat beside her, 2 drinks in his hands. Sani didn't even glance at him. She just shifted slightly to give him room. Who even says something like that if they're not planning to have a conversation, she thought. She kept her attention on her friends and co-workers mingling across the room. Later that evening, as she walked to catch a ride home, she mentioned the odd encounter to Taylor and Marky. They laughed, wished each other a good weekend, and promised to see each other Monday. Monday morning came quickly. Sani, a client acquisition specialist, was preparing for a big meeting. Her job was to sign new clients while her team handled the details of fulfilling their company needs. Today, Monterri Boss, CEO of the Boss firm, was visiting to hear her proposal on boosting morale at his communications company. It was a major project. His firm was on the verge of global expansion, with over 300 employees stateside and another 200 soon to be onboarded. The finding firm, Sani's company, had no shortage of clients, but this contract would open doors for senior promotions and help launch their digital training library for corporations worldwide. "Sani, Mr. Boss is here. Would you like me to show him in?" Marky asked, poking her head through the door. She grinned. "No one said he was fine and fit. I wonder if he has someone to share all that goodness with." "Oh, I'm sure that's none of our concern," Sani replied, straightening her notes. We just need to focus on his business, making sure we provide the training support his employees need." Marky smirked. "You always want to get down to business. I'll send him in." Sani heard a deep voice in the hallway thanking Marky, and froze. It was him, the man from Friday night. Why didn't he say anything then? I would have at least entertained a conversation. When he stepped into the room, their eyes met. He was striking, smooth dark brown complexion, a dimple cutting into his cheek as he smiled, and a tailored suit that only highlighted his physique. Marky had been right. Still stunned, Sani took a steady breath as he held out his hand. "Mr. Boss," Sani said softly, placing her hand in his. "Nice to meet you, Miss Sani Bello," he replied, his grip lingering a moment longer than most professional handshakes. A smile tugged at his lips. "You have such a great office environment. Everyone here is so engaging, and all the communication leading up to today's meeting was seamless." "Thank you," Sani answered with quiet pride. "We all work together here at the finding firm. Clear communication is how we support one another." "That's good to know." Monterri waited politely for her to take a seat before lowering himself into the chair across from her, unbuttoning his jacket as he did. Sani's eyes betrayed her for a moment, following the movement of his hands just long enough to notice the strength in his build. She caught herself quickly, shifting her focus back to the presentation. She began outlining strategies to strengthen communication within his company's main department before expanding outward to international partners. Monterri listened intently, voicing his concerns along the way. Sani responded with well-prepared solutions, each one practical. When she finished, he leaned back slightly. "Miss Bello, I'm impressed. Your approach is thorough, and your ideas could really impact the success of my company. Before I make a final decision, though, I'd like you to meet with my team. I believe in running all communications through them before moving forward." "Of course," Sani said, reaching for the intercom. "I'll have Marky and Gayal schedule a visit with your team." Monterri reached out, his hand gently resting on hers, stopping her mid-motion. "I don't think you heard me," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "I asked for you. I'd like you to come to my office and meet my team. You don't have to come alone, but I'd prefer it if you did." Sani froze, staring at his hand on hers, then up into his determined eyes. She wanted to remind him of protocol, of the boundaries that kept stress low and professionalism high, but something in his gaze told her this meeting was necessary. Ignoring the warmth of his touch, she gave a small nod. Satisfied, Monterri slipped his jacket back on and moved toward the door. Just before leaving, he glanced back at her, a hint of a smile in his eyes. "Hopefully," he said, "we'll be able to share a drink, this time, to celebrate our successful partnership." With that, he turned and walked down the hall. A few days later, Sani stepped into the sleek lobby of Boss Communications. The space radiated quiet power, floor-to-ceiling windows pouring in light, glass walls that reflected ambition, and the hum of employees moving with purpose. She was greeted warmly, introduced to Monterri's team, and carried herself through the meeting with practiced poise. But every time she caught him watching her, the air shifted. His presence pressed at the edges of her focus, steady and deliberate, like he knew she was fighting to stay composed. When the last handshake ended and the door clicked shut, silence filled the room. Monterri leaned casually against the edge of the conference table, his eyes steady on her. "You know," he began, his tone smoother now, "I saw you before I ever knew we'd end up doing business together." Sani folded her arms, arching a brow. "About that, why did you tell me to act like we didn't know each other, when we actually didn't know each other?" His grin spread slowly, dimples flashing. "I was hoping you'd turn around, maybe challenge me. But instead, you took what I said literally, and honestly, that intrigued me even more." "So you didn't know it was me you'd be meeting with?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "Not at all," he admitted. "When I walked into your office that day, I was just as surprised as you were, maybe more." Her heart gave a little leap she tried to ignore. "So, You were interested in me. Like, not just business interested. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. Well, you didn't say anything that night, so I assumed you weren't interested. Sani shook her head, half laughing. Hold on, you told me not to say anything. What kind of pickup line is that? Who tells a woman to act like they don't know them? Monterri chuckled, low and warm. When you are who I am, Miss Bello, it's always wise to test intentions. Most women would have jumped at the chance to talk, to be seen. You didn't. That told me you weren't like the others. Sani's lips parted, caught between flattered and cautious. And what exactly are you hinting at now, Mr. Boss? He pushed off the table, closing just enough of the space between them to stir the air. That I'd like to see you again, outside of boardrooms and proposals. The warmth in his voice lingered, heavy with suggestion. Sani took a measured breath, willing her pulse to slow. Monterri, we're doing business together. I don't cross those boundaries. His smile was knowing, teasing. Boundaries can be respected, but they can also be negotiated. The way he said it made her heart race despite herself. Back at the office, Sani closed her door and sank into her chair. Marky and Taylor slipped in a few minutes later, both wearing the kind of curious grins that meant they'd been waiting for details. Sani tells them about the conversation she had with Monterri once his team was dismissed from the meeting. Well, Taylor asked, settling on the edge of her desk. How did it go with Mr. Boss? Sani exhaled, playing nervously with the pen in her hand. The meeting was fine. His team liked the proposal. But after, she hesitated, then admitted, he asked me to dinner. Marky's eyebrows shot up. Dinner? Oh, he's bold. Taylor leaned forward. And what did you say? I told him no, Sani confessed, shaking her head. I don't want anything personal interfering with business. Taylor waved a hand. But you don't even handle the clients face-to-face once the contracts are signed. Francisco's team is taking over Monterri's project now. You'll be moving on to the next acquisition. Marky nodded quickly. Exactly. So there's no conflict. And let's not forget, he was interested in you before he even knew your name, before any of this business stuff came up. That says something. Sani chewed her bottom lip, remembering Monterri's eyes on her, the heat of his hand brushing hers, the charged silence that felt like it belonged to them alone. So, Taylor pressed, are you interested? Sani hesitated, her gaze dropping to her phone. The memory of his smile, his voice, the way he'd said boundaries could be negotiated, all of it stirred something she couldn't ignore. Finally, she opened a new message, her fingers hovering before she typed, Dinner works. Let me know the time and place. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Marky and Taylor exchanged a look and squealed in unison. Sani just shook her head, a small, nervous smile tugging at her lips. What am I getting myself into? A relationship, Taylor and Marty said in unison. Sani arrived at Harris's by a car Monterri had sent to pick her up in, the restaurant glowing with warm candlelight and the soft hum of jazz. She hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. Monterri was already waiting. He rose as she approached, his shirt open at the collar, his smile easy but purposeful. Sani, he said, pulling out her chair. I wasn't sure you'd come. She slid into her seat, lifting her chin just slightly. I wasn't sure either. Her eyes held his. So tell me again, why me? Why dinner? Monterri didn't hesitate. He leaned forward, his voice steady and low. Because the way we met, it wasn't random. It was destiny. Sani blinked, caught off guard. Destiny? Yes, he said, his dimple flashing as his smile deepened. I don't pass up a chance to see what destiny has in store for me. I saw you before I knew your name, before I knew anything about you, and still, I couldn't look away. Her chest tightened, heat rising to her cheeks. She forced a small laugh, trying to deflect. Destiny, huh? That's a big word to throw around over dinner. He tilted his head, unbothered. I don't throw words I don't mean. You weren't supposed to be just another face at a mixer. Then, When I walked into your office and realized it was you, it only confirmed it. Some things you don't question, you follow. Her cheeks warmed under his gaze. She shifted slightly, trying to ground herself in professionalism. This still feels risky. Business and personal don't always mix well. That's true, he said, leaning back just enough to give her space. Which is why I wanted to ask you now, before this becomes anything more complicated. If you'd rather keep this business only, I'll respect that. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. He wasn't just playing, he was giving her a choice. Sani looked down at her glass, fingers tracing the rim before lifting her eyes to his again. And if I say yes, what exactly are you hoping for? Her pulse quickened at the certainty in his tone. And what exactly do you think destiny has in store, Mr. Boss? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. His gaze held hers, unwavering. That's what I'm hoping to find out, with you. The server arrived with their meals, breaking the silence, but the weight of his words lingered between them. So let me get this straight. You walk up to women at mixers, tell them to act like they don't know you, and call that destiny. Monterri chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Not women. You. There's a difference. Oh, right, she said, feigning seriousness. Because I'm special. He leaned forward again, his gaze warm and unwavering. Exactly. You are. Her cheeks heated, though she covered it with a playful roll of her eyes. You're smooth, Mr. Boss. I bet lines like that get you very far. Not as far as you think, he countered, grinning. Most people want something from me. Money, power, opportunities. I don't waste lines on people who are temporary. But you... He let the words hang, letting her fill the silence. Sani set her fork down, tilting her head as if appraising him. So what's the test then? You toss out some strange comment, wait for a reaction, and if she doesn't chase you, that makes her different. He smirked. Worked on you, didn't it? You're sitting here across from me. She laughed, shaking her head. Please, I'm here because I like pasta, and because my friends wouldn't stop telling me to say yes. Then I owe them a thank you, he said, his dimple flashing again. Because I have no intention of letting this be our last dinner. Sani arched a brow, lips curving. Confident, aren't you? Not confident, he corrected smoothly. Certain. There's a difference. Certainty comes with knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make her pulse jump. Sani laughed again, but it came out softer, more nervous this time. You're dangerous. He raised his glass, his grin widening. Only to women who believe in destiny, shaking her head but unable to hide her smile. Well then, I guess I'm in trouble. They lingered over their wine, plates long cleared, conversation drifting into comfortable rhythm. What had started with business chatter slowly melted into stories of family, travel, and the odd habits they each carried. At one point, Monterri leaned back, studying her, his tone shifting. You know, Sani, you're so confident behind a desk. In business, you command the room. But here, he gestured lightly between them, you seem more guarded. Why is that? The question caught her off guard. She blinked, straightening in her seat. That's not fair. My job is to acquire partnerships and pass them to my team. That's where the confidence is needed. Out there, it's different. He tilted his head, that knowing smile tugging at his lips. Different or safer? Her mouth opened, then closed. Before she could form an answer, he continued. At the mixer, I noticed. You sat, watching everyone else buzz around with small talk and forced laughs. You didn't need to be the loudest in the room. You were just there. Sani narrowed her eyes, a spark of amusement mixing with surprise. So you were watching me that closely, huh? Monterri didn't flinch. I couldn't help it. Your silent beauty, the way you carry yourself with such ease, and your style. It's effortless, but unforgettable. Heat crept into her cheeks, though she masked it with a teasing grin. Compliments will get you everywhere, Mr. Boss, but that sounds like a practiced line. He chuckled, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I saw you months ago, at an expo downtown. I was on my way to approach you, and then you were gone, like you vanished." Her heart skipped, caught between flattery and disbelief. "So, what you're saying is, you're officially a stalker." Monterri laughed, the sound rich and unbothered. "Only for things I like." Sani arched a brow, playful now. "You barely know me, that's the thing," he said, his voice deepening with a sincerity that pulled her in. "I don't need to know everything to recognize when I'm drawn to someone. I asked the universe for a chance to meet you again, and here we are." Sani looked down at her glass, her pulse quickening at the weight of his words. When her eyes lifted to his again, she saw the same intensity she'd felt from the moment their hands touched in her office. The room felt smaller, the noise around them fading. For once, she didn't have a quick defense. On the ride home, Sani leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, letting the city lights blur past her. Monterri's words replayed in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake. He had said things she didn't expect, things that slipped past her defenses and settled somewhere deep. For so long, she had convinced herself that men didn't really know how to communicate, not in the ways that mattered. Her last relationship had been proof of that: silent nights, unspoken frustrations, and a love that eventually crumbled under the weight of everything left unsaid. But Monterri was different. He didn't just speak, he communicated. He had a way of letting her know not only what he thought, but what he felt, and most surprising of all, what he felt about her. It was disarming, almost unnerving, but also exactly what she had been missing. Her chest rose with a quiet breath as she remembered his last words at the table, the certainty in his voice when he spoke of destiny, of being drawn to her. He had already made plans for them to meet again on Friday, and instead of the nerves she expected to feel, there was something else humming through her: excitement. For the first time in a long while, Sani allowed herself to lean into it. By the third date, the tension between them was undeniable. Monterri invited Sani to his penthouse for dinner. The space was warm and elegant, the city skyline glittering through tall windows, jazz humming low in the background. The meal was simple but intentional: roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, a bottle of red. They laughed and talked, conversation sliding easily from business to personal memories, each story peeling away another layer. At one point, Sani leaned back in her chair, studying him with a mix of curiosity and nerves. "You know, you've led every single one of our dates so far. The mixer, the rooftop, now this." She gave a small laugh, fiddling with the stem of her glass. "I haven't planned anything yet. I'm not used to someone taking the reins." Monterri's expression softened. He set his glass down and leaned forward, his voice steady and low. "Sani, let go. Allow someone who wants to love on you to do so." Her breath caught at the word love. He continued, "I don't want to impress you with what I can give, or with what I have. I want to just be myself, with someone I know actually likes me." His eyes searched hers, earnest and unflinching. "Do you know how rare that is for me?" Sani blinked, taken aback. No man had ever said it so plainly to her. Her chest tightened, her usual defense faltering. "That's different," she whispered. "I don't know what to do with that." "Don't do anything," Monterri said, his lips curving into that slow, dangerous smile. "Just let me." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Sani's pulse thundered in her ears. She tried to look away, but his presence pulled her in. Monterri stood, rounding the table. He stopped just in front of her, lowering himself slightly so their faces were level. His hands cupped her cheeks, thumbs brushing lightly against her skin. Then his lips claimed hers. It wasn't tentative. It was fire, raw, consuming. Years of unspoken hunger condensed into one moment. Sani gasped against him, her hands clutching the front of his shirt, pulling him closer as though she'd been waiting for this without even knowing it. The kiss deepened, urgent, powerful, until they finally broke apart, breathless. Her lips tingled, her heart racing. She pressed her forehead to his chest, whispering, "Wow." Monterri's dimple flashed as he bent his head close. "Destiny, Sani," he murmured, his voice rough with certainty. "And I don't plan on running from it." The cafe was buzzing with weekend chatter, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries filling the air. Sani sat across from Marky and Taylor at their usual booth, her untouched mimosa sweating on the table. Taylor leaned forward first, eyes narrowing. Sani sighed, pressing her napkin to her lap. "It's moving too fast. Monterri is..." She shook her head, searching for the words. "He's intentional, bold. He doesn't hide how he feels, and I don't know if I'm ready for all of that." Marky raised a brow. Ready or scared? Sani's throat tightened. She hesitated, then whispered, "Both. You know what I went through. Finding my fiancé in bed with the neighbor. I can still hear his excuse, that I worked too much, that I wasn't available." The table fell quiet for a moment, the weight of the memories settling between them. Taylor reached across, giving her hand a squeeze. "And that's exactly why we changed things, remember? That's why you stepped into leadership. You built the team up, added more lead positions, so you wouldn't have to carry everything yourself anymore. You made space for your life." Marky nodded, her tone firm but kind. "And now that space is here. Don't let your trauma fill it. Follow your healing, Sani, not your fear. If you keep looking backwards, you'll miss what's right in front of you." Sani swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. "You really think Monterri could be different?" Marky smirked. "He already is. He's not hiding you. He's not making excuses. He's showing up, fully. That's what you asked for when you healed. Don't punish him for someone else's mistakes." Taylor added softly, "The question is, do you want to keep letting him show you who he is?" Sani leaned back, her chest tight but lighter. Monterri's words, his certainty, his unshakable presence, all of it flashed in her mind. "Maybe I do," she admitted quietly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Marky and Taylor exchanged a knowing glance, clinking their mimosas together. "To healing," Marky said.
"And to destiny," Taylor added with a grin. Sani raised her glass, her heart steadying. "To both." Monday morning, Sani stepped off the elevator expecting another routine start to her week, but what she found stopped her cold. Her office floor had been transformed. Streamers draped across the ceiling in elegant arcs, fairy lights twinkled like stars, and the sound of soft jazz floated through the air. It was the same music, the same atmosphere, the same electric feeling as the mixer where she had first met Monterri. Staff were gathered in clusters, laughing and mingling just like that Friday night, glasses of sparkling cider in hand. Francisco, Marky, Gael, and Taylor were all together in a corner, their smiles too wide to be casual. Sani's brows knitted in confusion as she stepped further inside, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She turned in slow circles, her heart pounding. "What is going on?" she whispered to herself. Before she could finish the thought, a familiar voice came from behind her, low, warm, playful. "Hey, I'm going to sit next to you, and I want you to act like you don't know me, so no one thinks we're together." Her breath caught. Every nerve in her body recognized it instantly. The words, their beginning. She froze for just a heartbeat, her hands trembling at her sides. Slowly, deliberately, she turned. And there was Monterri, down on one knee, his eyes locked on hers, his dimple showing even through the emotion glistening across his face.
"Sani," he said, his voice carrying through the crowd. That night I didn't know your name, your story, or your heart, but I knew I was drawn to you. Since then, every moment has only confirmed what I felt, what I knew. Tears blurred her vision as he reached for her hand. I've fallen in love with you, and I want to share destiny with you, for the rest of my life. Only you. The room erupted in gasps and hushed cheers as Sani pressed her free hand to her mouth. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then a radiant smile broke through her tears. Yes, she whispered, her voice cracking. Then louder, stronger. Yes! The crowd cheered as Monterri slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. Their lips met in a fiery kiss that felt like it carried every unspoken promise between them. Past, present, and future colliding in one explosive moment. When she finally pulled back, breathless and glowing, her eyes swept the crowd and froze. Her parents were there, standing at the edge of the room, tears streaming down their cheeks. Her brother stood beside them, clapping with pride, his smile wide and unshakable. Sani's hand flew to her chest as fresh tears spilled down her face. Monterri held her close, whispering, "It's all for you." And as the cheers swelled around them, Sani knew. This was destiny fulfilled. The months after the proposal passed in a blur of joy and momentum. At work, the finding firm's partnership with Boss Communications proved to be more successful than anyone had imagined. Together, they reshaped corporate culture and communication strategies. So much so that the finding firm received an offer to buy their ideas and processes outright. Meanwhile, Boss Communications was revolutionizing communication platforms for education worldwide, making a global impact. For Sani, the changes were just as personal as they were professional. Her role expanded into regional client acquisition specialist, where she provided ongoing support through strategic meetings, retreats, and hands-on connections. No longer weighed down by doing everything herself, she found a rhythm that allowed her to enjoy the life Monterri had always envisioned sharing with her. And then came the wedding. It was simple, elegant, and full of love. Family, friends, and co-workers gathered together to celebrate a union that already felt destined. Sani's dress shimmered under soft lights, and Monterri's gaze never left her, his pride and devotion visible in every moment. Sani quickly grew close to Monterri's family. His mother and father welcomed her like a daughter, and his 4 sisters and brothers embraced her as one of their own. She found not only a husband, but an entire family that felt like home. As she stood with him at the altar, Sani thought back to the heartbreak she had once carried, the betrayal, the silence, the years she spent healing alone. She realized now that every tear, every lonely night, had led her here. What once felt like loss had been preparing her for abundance. Her heart whispered the truth. The pain had been worth it, because it opened the door to the treasures she now held. By letting go, by allowing destiny to heal her heart, Sani had found not just love, but the life she always deserved. When the last toast was made and the final song faded, Sani and Monterri slipped away from the reception, hand in hand. The night air was warm, stars scattered across the sky as if even heaven was celebrating. In the quiet of their suite, there were no crowds, no speeches, no obligations, just the two of them, finally alone as husband and wife. Monterri cupped her face as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and Sani melted into his touch, her heart overflowing. Their kiss deepened, unhurried yet powerful, a promise unfolding with every brush of lips and every whispered word. It wasn't just passion, it was intention. Every touch was filled with meaning, every embrace layered with the truth of who they had become together. For Sani, it was more than desire. It was healing, a love unlimited, free of the shadows of her past, no longer hindered by hurt. The heartbreak she once carried had no place here. Monterri's arms were her safe harbor, his love a steady wave washing over her again and again. They moved together as though time didn't exist, as though the night itself had been made for them alone. And when sleep finally came, it wasn't an ending, but a beginning, the first of many nights where love would not only be felt, but lived, Destiny had brought them here. Love would carry them forward.
Thank you for listening to Heart Chat Stories. Every story is written with love, to heal, to inspire, and to remind you that new beginnings are always possible. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so others can find healing through story. Until next time, keep your heart open and your spirit lifted.